In 1165, Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor, received a letter from a king whose power and influence far exceeded his own. It was a letter which Frederick believed would change the course of history. The letter which Frederick and the Pope, as well as other kings, received that year came from a mysterious monarch called John the Priest, Prester John, who called himself Lord of Lords, excelling all the kings on earth in strength and power. John's kingdom was a land of legendary wealth and mystery. No fewer than 72 other kings paid homage and were vassals to John. John promised that he would round up all of his forces and assist the kingdoms of the West to drive the Muslims in a great crusade from the Holy Land once and for all. With great hope in his heart, in 1177, Pope Alexander III replied with a long letter to Prester John. In it, he promised to meet John at the holy city of Jerusalem and there baptize him into the true Christian faith. Alexander entrusted his personal doctor, Philip, with the message and sent him off in search of the legendary kingdom. Philip departed and was never heard from again. The problem was, of course, that the kingdom of Prester John and Prester John himself never actually existed. His magical kingdom was said by some to be in India, some in Ethiopia, and others in mysterious lands to the north and east of Europe. Despite this, the legend of Prester John survived for centuries, and many lost their lives in a fruitless search for his fabulous treasures. Looking at the letter which Prester John sent to the crowned heads of Europe, it is not hard to see why the fascination persisted. In addition to ruling over 72 lesser kings, John's kingdom supposedly stretched from farthest India to the Babylonian desert near the Tower of Babel. Its wonders stretched the imagination of the medieval mind. Its livestock included elephants, dromedaries, camels, hippopotami, crocodiles, panthers, aurochs, lions, white bears, tigers, hyenas, and oxen. Its people were made up of wild archers, wild men, men with horns, fauns, satyrs, pygmies, dog-headed men, giants whose height exceeded 40 cubits, one-eyed men known as cyclopses, and a bird, which was called the phoenix, which could be raised again from the dead after it had been burned. The land flowed with honey and abounded with milk. There were no poisonous animals, no scorpions, no snakes, and the frogs did not croak. In the midst of the land was a river called Adonis. This river flowed straight out of paradise, and instead of sand at its base were found emeralds, sapphires, carbuncles, topaz, onyx, beryls, amethysts, and other precious gems. Anyone who drank the water of this river for 3 days straight would not age, but would stay feeling as though they were 32 years old for as long as they lived. If one of the jewels from this river was placed into a ring and worn, the person who wore the ring would never go blind. Their sight would not fail, but instead their eyesight would become sharper and sharper the more they looked. Eventually, they would gain the power to render themselves invisible. Another river in the kingdom did not flow with water, but instead flowed with stones and rocks for 3 days at a time, and then it would stop for 1 day. The rocks and stones would flow down the river and eventually find their way to a sea made entirely of sand. This sea could not be crossed by boat, but apparently produced wondrous fish, which were the most delightful you could possibly eat. In another province, there were found lizards which they called salamanders, who lived in fire, and if taken out of the fire, they produce a membrane which could be unpacked to make silk. The children of the land of Prester John were taught to hold their breath for days at a time. This allowed them to swim to the bottom of the river, collect the precious stones, and bring them back to their parents. For this reason, everybody in the land was fabulously wealthy. Another feature of the people was that they were unable to tell a lie. If anybody did try to tell a lie, they would immediately die. There were no adulterers, and no vice was to be found anywhere in the kingdom. This is just a fraction of the wonders to be found in the kingdom of Prester John. As he himself wrote, "If you can count the stars in heaven and the sand of the sea, then you can calculate the extent of our kingdom and of our power." Eventually, people stopped searching for this wondrous land, but for nearly 300 years, the legend of Prester John and his wonderful kingdom captured the imaginations of kings, popes and rulers across Europe. Next time, the mystery of the Marie Celeste. See you then.